Move your cart, cleaning lady. You're blocking important people. Richard Stone shoved Keisha Williams's cart aside with his briefcase. The force sent her supplies crashing to the marble floor. Bottles rolled, papers scattered. Every executive in the Harrison Industries lobby stopped and stared. Others whispered behind manicured hands. Keisha dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the mess. Her worn uniform looked even shabbier against the gleaming marble. "Pathetic," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. The circle of suits watched her crawl. No one helped. No one spoke up. They just walked away, heading to their important meetings upstairs, including the billion-dollar negotiation on the 47th floor, where Elena Martinez sat alone behind frosted glass doors. Her hands moved frantically in sign language, trying to communicate with executives who had already stopped paying attention. Everyone ignored the deaf billionaire, just like they ignored the cleaning lady. Have you ever wondered how one moment of recognition can change everything? 3 hours later, Keisha pushed her cart through the executive wing on the 47th floor. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through floor-to-ceiling windows. She moved quietly past the boardroom, invisible as always. But something made her pause. Through the glass walls, she saw Elena Martinez sitting alone at the massive conference table. Papers scattered everywhere. Empty chairs surrounded her like silent judges. Elena's hands moved rapidly in the air, sharp, frustrated gestures that cut through the silence. Keisha's breath caught. She recognized those movements. Elena signed the same phrase over and over. Trapped, no voice. Trapped. The billionaire's face twisted with helplessness. Her billion-dollar renewable energy deal hung in the balance, but without an interpreter, she might as well have been invisible. Keisha glanced down the hallway. Empty. She looked back at Elena, whose hands now formed the words, "Help me," in desperate repetition. Her cleaning cart suddenly felt heavier. The uniform that had protected her anonymity now felt like a prison. She was just the cleaning lady. She wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to see this, but she understood every word Elena was signing. Elena slumped forward, placing her head in her hands. The powerful woman who controlled millions looked utterly defeated. Keisha's own hands began to move unconsciously, mirroring Elena's signs. Her fingers remembered the language she'd learned 20 years ago when her baby brother Marcus came home from the hospital, born deaf into a world that rarely listened. Down the hallway, voices grew louder. CEO Thomas Harrison approached with 2 other executives, their conversation carrying fragments. Postpone the meeting. Can't find another interpreter. Billion-dollar deal on hold. Harrison reached for the boardroom door handle. This was it. The moment Elena would be dismissed, sent away because no one could understand her voice. Keisha's cart squeaked as she took a single step forward, then stopped. What was she thinking? She was nobody, just a woman with a mop and a secret. But sometimes, nobody changes everything. The boardroom door clicked shut behind Thomas Harrison. Elena looked up with red-rimmed eyes as he approached with apologetic shoulders. "Ms. Martinez, I'm afraid we'll have to reschedule. Without proper communication, we can't—" A soft knock interrupted him. All eyes turned to see Keisha standing in the doorway, her cleaning cart abandoned in the hallway. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison." Her voice was quiet but clear. "I couldn't help but notice—" Harrison's eyebrows furrowed. "I'm sorry, but this is a private meeting." Keisha's gaze shifted to Elena, whose face showed polite confusion. Then Keisha raised her hands and began to sign. "Hello, Ms. Martinez. My name is Keisha. I can interpret for you if you'd like." The transformation was instant. Elena's mouth fell open. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears of relief. Her hands flew up in response. "You know ASL? How is this possible?" The executive stood frozen, watching this impossible conversation unfold in complete silence. Keisha's hands moved with fluid grace. My younger brother is deaf. I've been signing since I was 8 years old. Elena's face crumpled with gratitude. She signed rapidly. I thought I was going to lose everything. No one understands. I understand, Keisha signed back. May I help? Harrison watched this exchange with growing amazement. The woman he'd seen cleaning floors for 3 years was conducting a sophisticated conversation in a language he couldn't comprehend. Elena turned to Harrison and signed something urgent. Keisha translated without missing a beat. Ms. Martinez says she's been trying to explain that the environmental impact data in Section 12 has a critical error. The carbon offset calculations are 30%. Harrison's face went pale. That error could cost us millions in penalties. Elena continued signing. Keisha's voice became her voice. She also says the Chinese manufacturing timeline needs adjustment. The proposed schedule conflicts with their New Year production halt. How could she possibly know about Chinese manufacturing schedules? Harrison asked. Elena signed again, a small smile breaking through her tears. She says she's been doing business in 12 countries for 40 years. Details matter when you can't afford miscommunication. Harrison looked between Elena and Keisha, his mind racing. This cleaning woman wasn't just translating words. She was facilitating complex business communication with perfect fluency. Elena reached across the table and slid her gold pen toward Keisha. In the business world, this gesture meant respect, recognition, equality. Keisha hesitated, then picked up the pen. The weight of it felt like a possibility. Ms. Martinez wants to know, Keisha continued translating, if you're willing to proceed with the meeting. She says the international investors are flying back to their countries tomorrow morning. This is our last chance. Harrison's phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Li Wei from Beijing called. Says he's leaving for the airport in 2 hours if we can't resolve the communication issues. Elena signed something else, her hands moving with quiet urgency. She says, Keisha translated, that she's never met an interpreter who understands both business terminology and cultural nuance. She asks where you studied. Keisha's hands paused for just a moment. Tell her I studied in the library, every day after school. While other kids played, I learned languages because my brother deserved a sister who could help him navigate the world. Elena's eyes filled with fresh tears as she received this translation. She signed back with reverence. She says, Keisha's voice grew softer, that you don't just translate words, you translate hearts. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the city below. Harrison made his decision. Keisha, would you be willing to stay? We have investors arriving in 30 minutes from China, Brazil, and France. It seems we might actually need you more than we realized. Elena clapped her hands once, then signed rapidly to Keisha with obvious excitement. Ms. Martinez says, Keisha smiled for the first time that day, that the best partnerships begin with unexpected allies. As Harrison left to call the investors back, Elena reached over and squeezed Keisha's hand. No translation needed. In the span of 10 minutes, everything had changed. But this was only the beginning. As Keisha adjusted her position at the conference table, Elena signed a gentle question. Tell me your story. How did you become so fluent? The memories came flooding back. 20 years ago, 5-year-old Marcus Williams came home from the hospital. Born 3 months premature, the doctors said his hearing was gone forever. Their mother, Maria, worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table in their East Harlem apartment. Keisha was 8 when she realized she had become Marcus's voice to the world. I learned because I had to, Keisha signed to Elena. My little brother needed someone who could bridge his silence. She remembered sitting in the public library every day after school, checking out ASL books with worn covers and missing pages. The librarian, Mrs. Carter, eventually started saving new language books for her. How many languages do you speak? Elena asked. Keisha's hands moved carefully. 7. ASL, Spanish, English, Mandarin, French, Arabic, and Portuguese. I taught myself through library books and helping immigrant families in my neighborhood. Elena's eyebrows raised with surprise. My mother cleaned office buildings at night, Keisha continued. I'd go with her sometimes, and I'd see all these documents in different languages. I started asking questions, learning, understanding. The real turning point came when Marcus was 12. He'd been bullied at school, came home with bruises and tears. That night, he signed to Keisha. Sister, will anyone ever hear me? Keisha held him close and promised, I'll make sure the whole world learns to listen. She'd kept that promise for 15 years. Helping Marcus navigate school, translating at doctor visits, teaching him that his thoughts mattered, even if his voice was silent. I got a scholarship to Columbia for linguistics, Keisha signed to Elena. But when Mama got sick, I had to drop out. Been working here 3 years, saving money, hoping to go back someday. Elena's expression grew thoughtful. And your brother now? Engineering student. Full scholarship. He builds bridges with math and steel. I build them with words. Elena leaned forward and signed slowly. Every person deserves to be heard and understood. Keisha's heart skipped. Those were the exact words she'd whispered to Marcus that night 15 years ago. Yes, she signed back. That's exactly why I'm here. The boardroom door opened with authority. Thomas Harrison entered, followed by 3 individuals who commanded attention with their presence alone. Li Wei, the lead Chinese investor, wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and carried himself with quiet confidence. Carlos Mendoza from Brazil moved with the energy of someone accustomed to making quick decisions. Marie Dubois from France observed everything with sharp, calculating eyes. Behind them trailed Richard Stone, his face twisted with barely concealed displeasure at seeing Keisha still seated at the table. Gentlemen, lady, Harrison began, I'd like you to meet our interpreter, Keisha Williams. She'll be facilitating today's communication. Richard leaned toward Harrison and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Tom, she's a janitor, not a translator. This is highly irregular. Li Wei frowned, clearly understanding the English exchange. He spoke rapidly in Mandarin to his assistant, who looked equally confused. Keisha caught every word. Li Wei was expressing concern about unprofessional arrangements and questioning whether this meeting was legitimate business practice. She stood gracefully and addressed Li Wei directly in fluent Mandarin. Mr. Li, I understand your concerns about protocol. Please allow me to demonstrate my qualifications through my work rather than my appearance. Li Wei's eyes widened in shock. His assistant's jaw literally dropped. Your Mandarin is exceptional, Li Wei responded in his native language. Where did you study? I am self-taught, sir. I have great respect for Chinese business culture and the importance of proper communication in international partnerships. The transformation was immediate. Li Wei's posture shifted from skeptical to intrigued. He began asking complex questions about renewable energy infrastructure, testing her technical vocabulary. Keisha translated each question seamlessly for the room, then conveyed the English responses back to Li Wei with cultural context included. Richard Stone's discomfort grew visible. This is completely unprecedented. We haven't done background checks, security clearances. Carlos Mendoza interrupted in Portuguese. Excuse me, but does anyone here speak Portuguese? I have specific environmental concerns about the Brazilian production facilities. Richard looked helplessly around the room. The standard translator they'd used before had only worked in English and Spanish. Keisha turned to Carlos with a warm smile and responded in perfect Portuguese. Mr. Mendoza, I'd be happy to address your environmental concerns. What specific aspects worry you most? Carlos's face lit up with relief. He launched into rapid Portuguese, explaining complex environmental regulations and sustainability requirements. As Keisha translated, she didn't just convert words, she provided context. Mr. Mendoza explains that Brazilian environmental law requires specific biodegradable materials in solar panel production. He's concerned our current specifications don't meet their regulatory standards. Marie Dubois watched this exchange with growing interest. She tested Keisha with a question in rapid French about regulatory compliance. Without hesitation, Keisha responded in flawless French, then smoothly translated for the room. Li Wei spoke to his assistant in Mandarin. This woman understands nuance. She doesn't just translate words, she translates meaning. When Keisha relayed this compliment to the room, Elena clapped silently, her face beaming with pride. The international investors began directing their questions primarily to Keisha. She moved between languages like a conductor leading an orchestra, ensuring everyone understood not just the words, but the cultural implications behind them. Richard Stone stood in the corner, his influence suddenly irrelevant. Harrison watched in amazement as the meeting that had been destined for failure transformed into productive negotiation. But Li Wei had one more test. He posed a complex question about manufacturing timeline conflicts during Chinese New Year. Keisha not only translated perfectly, but added, "Mr. Li suggests adjusting the timeline to respect the cultural significance of the holiday, which would actually improve worker productivity and quality control." Li Wei smiled for the first time since entering the room. The tide had turned. The moment the international investors stepped out for a coffee break, Richard Stone pounced. "Tom, we need to talk. Now!" His voice carried the authority of someone used to getting his way. "This is completely unacceptable." Harrison glanced at Keisha, who was quietly organizing Elena's documents. "Richard, she's clearly qualified." "Qualified." Richard's laugh was sharp and bitter. "She pushes a mop for a living. We know nothing about her background, her education, her security clearance. What if she's recording sensitive information? What if she misrepresents our positions?" The other executives who had remained in the room began nodding. Corporate protocol was sacred in their world. "The liability issues alone could destroy us," Richard continued, warming to his theme. "Insurance won't cover breaches caused by unauthorized personnel. Legal will have our heads if this goes wrong." Keisha felt the familiar weight of judgment settling on her shoulders. She'd experienced this before, the moment when her value was questioned not based on her abilities, but on where she came from. Elena watched the exchange with growing anger, her hands beginning to form sharp, frustrated signs. "What's Ms. Martinez saying?" Harrison asked. Keisha hesitated, then translated. "She says she's seen this pattern in 12 countries. When men feel threatened by competence they didn't expect, they create rules to exclude it." Richard's face flushed red. "I am not threatened by a cleaning lady." "Then why are you working so hard to remove her?" Elena signed. Keisha translated faithfully. The tension in the room thickened like smoke. "Look," Richard addressed the room, deliberately turning his back to Keisha. "We have protocols for a reason. Professional translators go through background checks, security clearances, and professional certification. They carry insurance and sign confidentiality agreements." He gestured toward Keisha without looking at her. "What do we really know about her? Where did she come from? What are her real qualifications? This is a billion-dollar deal, not a community service project." The words stung because they contained just enough truth to be dangerous. Keisha had no formal credentials, no professional certification, no security clearance. She stood quietly, maintaining her dignity while feeling increasingly small. "I understand the concerns," she said softly. "If my presence makes anyone uncomfortable, I can leave. Ms. Martinez has my contact information if she needs future assistance." As she moved toward her cleaning cart, the international investors returned from their break. Li Wei immediately noticed the tension. "Where is the skilled translator going?" he asked in Mandarin. Carlos and Marie looked equally confused as Keisha gathered her supplies. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She began signing with fierce intensity, her movements sharp and definitive. Keisha found herself in an impossible position. Elena was signing something that would change everything, but translating it would mean speaking for herself in a way that felt presumptuous. "What is she saying?" Harrison demanded. Keisha took a deep breath. "Ms. Martinez says, if I leave, she leaves. And so does her billion-dollar investment." The room fell silent. Elena continued signing, and Keisha translated with growing strength in her voice. "She says she has negotiated in 12 languages across 40 countries. This is the most accurate and culturally sensitive interpretation she has ever experienced." Elena's hands moved with final, decisive authority. "She says," Keisha's voice grew stronger, "question my competence, and you question hers." Elena walked to the window, then turned back to face Richard directly. She signed one more sentence. "She says the deal is off unless I stay." Li Wei, Carlos, and Marie looked between Elena and the executives, clearly sensing the power struggle, but uncertain of the details. Richard's carefully constructed objections crumbled in the face of Elena's ultimatum. Harrison faced the hardest decision of his career: bow to corporate protocol or trust his instincts about talent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Harrison's hand moved slowly toward the conference table. He pulled out a chair. "Keisha, would you please stay? We need your expertise." The word expertise hung in the air like a declaration. "Please do not modify it. No assistance. Expertise." Richard Stone's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Elena's face broke into the first genuine smile of the day. "Let's continue," Harrison announced to the international investors. "We have a deal to close." The transformation was immediate and electric. Li Wei launched into detailed questions about solar panel efficiency standards. But instead of the stilted formal translations they'd endured with previous interpreters, Keisha provided seamless, culturally aware communication. "Mr. Li explains that Chinese manufacturing culture values long-term relationships over quick profits," she translated. "He's willing to accept lower initial margins in exchange for guaranteed 5-year partnership terms." Harrison's eyebrows raised. Previous translators had never provided this level of cultural insight. Carlos jumped in with rapid Portuguese about Brazilian environmental regulations. Again, Keisha didn't just translate, she bridged understanding. "Mr. Mendoza says Brazilian law requires specific biodegradable materials, but he can source them locally if we adjust our specifications by 15%. This would actually reduce shipping costs." Marie tested Keisha with complex French technical terminology about wind energy infrastructure. Without hesitation, Keisha not only translated but added crucial context about European regulatory differences. Ms. Dubois notes that French environmental standards are stricter than our current proposals, but meeting them would automatically qualify us for EU carbon credits worth an additional 50 million euros. The room's energy shifted from cautious negotiation to excited collaboration. Ideas flowed freely between languages and cultures. Li Wei spoke rapidly in Mandarin to his assistant, then turned to Keisha with obvious respect. "Mr. Li says he's never worked with an interpreter who understands the emotional undertones of business communication," Keisha translated. "He feels confident moving forward because he knows his concerns are being accurately represented." Elena watched this linguistic symphony with growing pride. She signed to Keisha. "You're not just translating words. You're building bridges between worlds." When Keisha shared this translation with the room, Carlos nodded enthusiastically. "Exactamente," he said in Portuguese, then switched to English. "Miss Williams, you understand our hearts, not just our words." The preliminary agreements began falling into place with remarkable speed. Li Wei committed to increased solar panel production timelines. Carlos agreed to expand lithium battery manufacturing. Marie pledged additional wind energy infrastructure development. What had been headed for complete failure was becoming a resounding success. Harrison found himself addressing questions directly to Keisha, treating her as an essential team member rather than hired help. Keisha, what's your read on the environmental compliance timeline? Based on the 3 regulatory frameworks we're navigating, I recommend a phased approach. Phase 1 for U.S. standards, Phase 2 for Brazilian requirements, Phase 3 for European compliance. This maximizes our carbon credit opportunities. Li Wei, Carlos, and Marie exchanged impressed glances. Elena reached across the table and placed her hand briefly on Keisha's arm. The gesture spoke volumes. Richard Stone stood against the wall, his earlier objections looking increasingly petty as the billion-dollar deal took shape before his eyes. Harrison made a decision that would echo through the company for years to come. Keisha, I'd like you to attend tomorrow's final negotiation as our official cultural liaison and senior interpreter. The word senior hit the room like lightning. Elena began applauding silently, her hands creating a soundless celebration. But the real test was still ahead. Tomorrow the stakes will be even higher. The boardroom emptied as the international investors departed for their hotels. Elena remained behind, signing something private to Keisha with a warm smile. Harrison approached as Elena gathered her materials. Ms. Martinez, I want to thank you for your patience today. Elena signed her response, which Keisha translated. She says today reminded her why she loves international business. When communication flows properly, impossible things become possible. Harrison nodded, then turned to Keisha. Could you stay for a moment? I'd like to discuss tomorrow's meeting. As Elena left, she pressed something into Keisha's palm. Her golden pen, the same one she'd slid across the table hours earlier. For tomorrow, Elena signed. May your words build bridges. Alone with Harrison, Keisha felt the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the reality of what had just happened. Keisha, Harrison began, settling into the chair across from her. Tomorrow, we have the final negotiation. The full consortium will be here, representatives from 6 countries, dealing with the largest renewable energy contract in company history. He paused, studying her face. I'd like you to be our official interpreter and cultural liaison. Keisha's hands trembled slightly around Elena's pen. Mr. Harrison, I appreciate this opportunity, but I need to be honest. I don't have formal credentials. I'm not certified through any professional organization. I learned these languages out of necessity, not through formal education. Harrison leaned forward. Keisha, I've been in business for 30 years. I've worked with dozens of professional interpreters. None of them provided the level of cultural insight and communication bridge that you demonstrated today. But the liability issues Richard mentioned, it is my responsibility, not yours. Harrison's voice carried quiet authority. What I saw today wasn't just a translation. It was leadership. You didn't just help us communicate, you helped us understand each other. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a temporary company ID badge. Keisha Williams, Senior Linguistic Consultant. The plastic card felt impossibly heavy in her hands. For 3 years, her only identification in this building had been her cleaning uniform. Senior? She whispered. You'll be the highest-ranking language specialist in company history, Harrison said simply. Because you've earned it. Keisha stared at the badge, seeing her name printed in the official company font. In 3 years of working here, no one ever asked my last name. Now it's on a badge. Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. I've learned something important today. Talent doesn't always come packaged the way we expect. Sometimes it comes by pushing a cleaning cart. He stood and moved to the window overlooking the city. My daughter has dyslexia. For years, teachers told us she wasn't smart enough for advanced classes. Now she's studying architecture at MIT. Her mind just works differently than they expected. He turned back to Keisha. Today, you reminded me that intelligence takes many forms. And sometimes the most valuable perspectives come from people the system has overlooked. Keisha clutched Elena's pen in one hand and her new badge in the other. Tomorrow, Harrison continued, you'll have everything you need. Proper business attire, access to all relevant documents, your own workspace. But most importantly, you'll have something that can't be provided, the respect of everyone in that room. Elena's pen caught the late afternoon light, a symbol of recognition finally received. The small apartment in East Harlem felt different that evening. The same cracked linoleum, the same second-hand furniture, but everything had changed. Keisha sat at her kitchen table, Elena's golden pen beside her laptop as she video-called Marcus. When his face appeared on screen, his eyes immediately caught the pen's gleam. Fancy pen, sister, he signed with a grin. Rob a bank today? Keisha laughed, the sound releasing tension she'd carried all day. She began signing rapidly, her hands dancing with excitement as she told him about Elena, the boardroom, the languages, the recognition. Marcus's expression shifted from playful to amazed to proud. His hands moved slowly when he finally responded. Remember when I was little? Kids at school made fun of my hearing aids. They called me Robot Boy because of the way I talked. His signs grew more deliberate. You always told me I had value that they couldn't see. Keisha's throat tightened. Today, Marcus continued, someone said that about you. She wiped away a tear that had escaped. I kept thinking about you during the meeting. About how many times people talked over you, around you, like you weren't there. But you were always there, Marcus signed. You made sure I was heard. The kitchen light flickered. Their landlord still hadn't fixed the wiring, but neither of them noticed. I'm scared about tomorrow, Keisha admitted. What if I mess up? What if I'm not enough? Marcus leaned closer to his camera, his expression serious. Sister, you've been enough your whole life. Tomorrow, let the world catch up to what I've always known. After they hung up, Keisha spread the renewable energy documents across her small table. Technical specifications in multiple languages, environmental impact reports, cultural considerations for 6 different countries. She picked up Elena's pen and began taking notes, preparing not just linguistically but emotionally for tomorrow's challenge. On her refrigerator, a photo of her mother caught her eye. Maria Williams, who'd cleaned offices and raised 2 children alone, who'd always said, Mija, your voice will lift others up. Keisha touched the photo gently. Mama, I think I'm finally understanding what you meant. She worked late into the night, Elena's pen flowing across pages of preparation. The pen felt like more than an object. It was a symbol of possibility, of recognition, of bridges built between worlds. Around midnight, she placed the pen carefully beside her worn Spanish-English dictionary. The contrast struck her. Past and future, struggle and opportunity, invisible and seen. Tomorrow would test everything she'd learned, everything she was. But tonight, for the first time in years, she felt ready. The boardroom buzzed with nervous energy at 9 a.m. sharp. Representatives from 6 countries filled the massive conference table, their combined investment power totaling over $1 billion. Keisha entered wearing a crisp navy business suit Harrison had arranged, Elena's golden pen clipped to her jacket pocket. She took her place at the table, not along the wall like yesterday, but as an equal participant. Li Wei nodded respectfully. Carlos smiled warmly. Marie offered a professional greeting in French. Elena signed, "Good morning, bridge builder," with obvious affection. Harrison called the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, today we finalize the largest renewable energy partnership in our company's history. Then the unexpected happened. The conference room doors opened, and 3 additional people entered. A woman in an expensive kimono-style business jacket led the group. Mr. Harrison, she said with a slight bow, I am Hiroshi Tanaka from Yamamoto Solar Industries. We apologize for the last-minute addition, but we have a manufacturing proposal that could revolutionize your production timeline. Harrison's face went pale. The Japanese contingent hadn't been part of the original negotiations. Hiroshi continued in English, but her accent was thick and her technical vocabulary limited. Our company wishes to participate in the solar panel. She struggled, then switched to rapid Japanese, speaking to her assistants in obvious frustration. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at Keisha. Keisha's heart sank. She had studied basic conversational Japanese, but technical business terminology was entirely different. She knew enough to understand that Hiroshi was discussing solar panel efficiency ratings and manufacturing quotas, but translating complex negotiations was beyond her capability. The billion-dollar deal hung in the balance. "Ms. Tanaka," Keisha said carefully in basic Japanese, "I understand you have an important proposal, but I must be honest about my limitations. My Japanese is conversational, not technical business level." Hiroshi's eyebrows raised in surprise at hearing her native language, but her expression remained concerned. Keisha's mind raced. She could fake it, pretend to understand more than she did. But one mistranslation could cost millions. Instead, she chose honesty. "However," she continued in Japanese, "I believe I can help us find a solution." She stood and moved to the whiteboard, grabbing a marker. "Numbers are universal," she said to the room, "and so are diagrams." She began sketching a simple solar panel diagram, then wrote key efficiency percentages underneath. She spoke to Hiroshi in basic Japanese. "Can you show us your efficiency numbers?" Hiroshi's face brightened. She approached the board and began writing specifications in both Japanese characters and Arabic numerals. The numbers told a story that transcended language barriers. Li Wei leaned forward, recognizing the implications immediately. Carlos whistled low. Marie began calculating rapidly on her phone. "These efficiency ratings," Keisha said to the room, "are 30% higher than our current specifications." Hiroshi nodded enthusiastically, then spoke rapidly in Japanese. Keisha caught enough to understand the general concept and asked clarifying questions in basic Japanese. "She's saying," Keisha translated carefully, "that their new photovoltaic technology can produce more energy with smaller panels. This would reduce shipping costs and installation time." But the real breakthrough came when Hiroshi, impressed by Keisha's honesty and problem-solving approach, revealed something unexpected. "Miss Williams," she said in accented but clear English, "I understand English better than I speak it. In Japan, we test Western partners by observing how they handle uncertainty. Do they pretend knowledge they don't have, or do they find creative solutions?" The room held its breath. "You chose honesty over pretense," Hiroshi continued. "This tells me you can be trusted with our technology secrets." Elena began clapping silently, her face beaming with pride. But the real test was just beginning. Hiroshi's proposal was complex: Japanese manufacturing efficiency, Chinese raw materials, Brazilian environmental compliance, French distribution networks, American innovation, and Elena's investment capital. 6 languages, 6 cultures, 6 sets of regulations and expectations. Keisha became the conductor of an intricate symphony. She moved between languages fluidly, but more importantly, she translated cultural nuances that could make or break the deal. When Li Wei expressed concern about technology sharing with Japanese competitors, Keisha helped frame the conversation around mutual benefit rather than competition. When Carlos worried about environmental impact, she connected Brazilian sustainability concerns with Japanese efficiency innovations. When Marie questioned regulatory compliance, she helped demonstrate how Japanese precision manufacturing would actually exceed European standards. The negotiations accelerated. Documents flew across the table. Technical specifications were debated in multiple languages. And through it all, Keisha ensured that Elena's voice remained central to every decision. "Ms. Martinez wants to emphasize," Keisha translated during a crucial moment, that this isn't just about profit margins. This technology could provide clean energy to rural communities across 3 continents. The human impact of their work brought focus to the financial complexity. But then Richard Stone, who had remained silent all morning, made his move. "I need to raise a concern about contract language interpretation," he announced, addressing the room. "How can we be certain that nuanced legal terminology is being translated accurately? One misinterpretation could expose us to massive liability." The international investors looked concerned. Legal precision was crucial in billion-dollar agreements. Elena's hands moved with sharp, decisive signs. Keisha took a deep breath and translated. "Ms. Martinez says she has negotiated in 12 languages across 40 countries over 30 years. She states that this interpretation is the most accurate and culturally sensitive she has ever experienced." Elena stood, her presence commanding attention. She continued signing with authoritative grace. "She says," Keisha's voice grew stronger, "that questioning my competence at this point is questioning her judgment, her experience, and her investment decision." Elena's final signs were delivered with unmistakable authority. "She says the deal proceeds with me as interpreter, or it doesn't proceed at all." Hiroshi, Li Wei, Carlos, and Marie exchanged glances. They had witnessed Keisha's work firsthand. They trusted her competence. Harrison made the executive decision. "We proceed as planned." The contracts were finalized. Signatures flowed across pages in 6 different alphabets. When the final signature was complete, the room erupted in applause. Keisha had just helped close the largest renewable energy deal in company history. But more than that, she had proven that talent, honesty, and cultural sensitivity could move mountains and billions of dollars. 2 hours later, the entire Harrison Industries building buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread through every floor. The billion-dollar deal was closed. Harrison stood at the podium in the main lobby, the same marble space where Keisha had been humiliated just 24 hours earlier. Employees crowded the balconies overlooking the atrium. Camera crews from local news stations positioned themselves strategically. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison's voice echoed through the building's sound system, "yesterday, we faced the potential loss of the largest renewable energy contract in our company's history." The crowd murmured with interest. "Today, we successfully closed a $1.2 billion partnership that will bring clean energy to communities across 6 continents." Applause rippled through the assembled employees. "This achievement was made possible by someone who has been among us for 3 years, but whom we truly saw for the first time yesterday." Harrison gestured toward the executive elevator. Keisha emerged, still wearing her navy business suit, Elena's golden pen visible on her lapel. The transformation was stunning. The woman who had crawled on these floors collecting spilled supplies now walked with quiet dignity toward the podium. Keisha Williams, our senior linguistic consultant, didn't just translate languages yesterday. She built bridges between cultures, solved complex communication challenges, and demonstrated that extraordinary talent often hides in unexpected places. The applause grew louder. Employees who had walked past Keisha for 3 years without acknowledgement now watched in amazement. Elena stepped forward from the crowd, signing something with obvious emotion. "Ms. Martinez," Harrison continued, "our lead investor wants to make an announcement." Elena's hands moved with graceful authority as Keisha translated. "Ms. Martinez is establishing a $50,000 scholarship fund for deaf education and linguistic studies. The fund will be administered through the Harrison Foundation." The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. But Elena wasn't finished. She continued signing, her face radiant with purpose. "The first scholarship recipient," Keisha's voice carried clearly through the microphone, "will be Marcus Williams, my brother, for his engineering studies at Columbia University." Keisha's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as the full impact hit her. Not only had she achieved recognition for herself, but she had secured her brother's future. Elena approached the microphone and spoke slowly in accented English. Keisha taught me that the most powerful voices sometimes speak without sound. Today, her voice echoes across continents. The news crews captured every moment as Harrison presented Keisha with an official company recognition award. But then came the moment that would define everything. Richard Stone approached the microphone. The crowd fell silent. Everyone knew about yesterday's conflict. "I owe someone a public apology," he began, his voice heavy with genuine remorse. "Yesterday, I let my assumptions blind me to extraordinary talent. I judged based on job title rather than ability." He turned to face Keisha directly. "I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. Your grace in the face of my prejudice shows a character I can only aspire to match." The silence was profound. "Keisha, would you accept my apology?" Keisha stepped to the microphone, her voice steady and strong. "Richard, we all have moments when we don't see clearly. What matters is what we do when our vision improves. Your apology is accepted." The crowd erupted in appreciation of her dignity. Elena signed something with obvious delight. "Ms. Martinez says," Keisha translated with a smile, "that this is why she knew I was special. I translate not just words, but hearts." Harrison retook the microphone. "Effective immediately, Harrison Industries is launching the Hidden Talent Initiative. We will actively seek and develop overlooked capabilities within our workforce." The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the employee ranks. Keisha will lead this initiative while completing her linguistics degree through our new educational partnership with Columbia University. 6 months later, the impact was undeniable. The Hidden Talent Initiative had identified and promoted 12 employees whose abilities had been overlooked due to their job titles or backgrounds. Sarah, the Syrian engineer working in security, now headed the Middle East expansion project. Miguel, the former architect driving the company shuttle, was designing sustainable building modifications. Dr. Patel, who had been cleaning labs while waiting for medical license recognition, now consulted on international health safety protocols. The program's success attracted national attention. Harvard Business Review featured Harrison Industries on their cover. The hidden value of invisible talent. Keisha's office on the 47th floor had become a pilgrimage site for executives wanting to learn about inclusive hiring practices. But the most meaningful moment came during a video call with Marcus, now thriving in his engineering program. "Sister," he signed from his dorm room, "remember when you promised the world would learn to listen to me?" Keisha nodded, Elena's golden pen still prominent on her desk. "You did more than that," Marcus continued. "You taught the world that everyone deserves to be heard." The camera pulled back to reveal Keisha's transformed office, walls covered with certificates of appreciation from international partners, photos with world leaders, and a simple frame containing the cleaning uniform she had worn that first day. She kept it as a reminder that worth isn't determined by what you wear, but by what you bring to the world. Elena entered the office, moving with the easy familiarity of deep friendship. "Ready for the Tokyo conference?" she signed. "Always," Keisha signed back, picking up her briefcase. As they left together, the cleaning cart from Keisha's former life remained in the corner, now a symbol of how far determination and recognition could take someone. The last shot showed the lobby where everything began. A new cleaning staff member, a young woman clearly overwhelmed by the grandeur, accidentally dropped her supplies. Instead of stepping over the mess, employees stopped to help. They asked her name. They treated her with dignity. The Hidden Talent Initiative had changed more than careers. It had changed culture. And in the center of the lobby, a bronze plaque read, "Extraordinary abilities often hide in ordinary moments." Look closer. Listen better. See everyone. The transformation was complete. But the real victory wasn't in the billion-dollar deal or the prestigious recognition. It was in the fundamental shift of how an entire organization valued human potential. Keisha Williams had not just found her voice. She had taught thousands of others to listen. 1 year later, Keisha stood in her corner office overlooking Manhattan, Elena's golden pen still prominent on her mahogany desk. The morning sun cast golden light across framed photos. Marcus graduating magna cum laude, Elena at the United Nations discussing accessibility rights, Harrison accepting a Diversity Leadership Award. Her phone buzzed with a video call from Sao Paulo. Carlos Mendoza appeared on screen, grinning broadly. Keisha, the Brazilian solar farm is operational. Clean energy for 200,000 families, all because someone took time to truly understand our environmental concerns. Similar calls came daily. Li Wei from Beijing reporting record-breaking manufacturing efficiency. Marie from Paris celebrating carbon credit milestones that exceeded projections. Hiroshi from Tokyo sharing new technological breakthroughs. The billion-dollar deal had grown into a $3.2 billion partnership spanning 4 continents. But the numbers weren't what made Keisha smile each morning. It was the transformation she witnessed daily. The Hidden Talent Initiative had evolved into a movement. 57 companies across 12 countries had adopted similar programs. Universities studied the economic impact of inclusive hiring. The Harvard Business Review estimated that properly utilizing overlooked talent generated $4.7 billion annually in increased productivity. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Sarah Hassan entered, now Director of International Engineering, carrying architectural plans for the company's first Middle East renewable energy facility. "The Damascus project is approved," Sarah said, her accent still carrying traces of her Syrian homeland. "Clean energy for refugee camps across 3 countries." 2 years ago, Sarah had been emptying trash cans, her engineering degree unrecognized in America. Today, she designed solutions for global challenges. "Any obstacles?" Keisha asked. "Language barriers with local contractors," Sarah smiled. "I believe we need a senior linguistic consultant." They laughed together, remembering how impossible such a conversation would have seemed before. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Williams, there's a young woman here about the apprenticeship program." Keisha walked to the lobby, finding a nervous teenager clutching a worn notebook. Her name tag read, Jessica, Custodial Staff. "You wanted to speak with me?" Keisha asked gently. Jessica's eyes widened. "You're really her? The one who—" She gestured vaguely upward, as if the executive floors were mythical realms. "I'm Keisha. What's your story?" "I speak 4 languages," Jessica whispered. "Korean, Spanish, English, and Portuguese. My family immigrated when I was little. I helped translate at the community center, but—" She looked down at her cleaning uniform. "Nobody here knows." Keisha's heart recognized the familiar story. "Jessica, what do you know about renewable energy?" "Everything," the young woman said, suddenly animated. "I read technical journals during breaks. Clean energy could transform my neighborhood in Queens, but I'm just—" She gestured at her uniform again. "You're just brilliant," Keisha corrected. "And tomorrow, you're starting our Junior Linguistic Associate program." Jessica's notebook fell from trembling hands. As Keisha helped her pick up the papers, she noticed meticulous notes about solar panel efficiency, wind energy calculations, and environmental impact studies, all written in 4 languages. The cycle continues, she thought, remembering her own journey from invisible to indispensable. That evening, Keisha video-called Marcus from her Harlem apartment. She had never moved from the neighborhood, though she could afford luxury now. This community had shaped her. She wouldn't abandon it for comfort. "How was your first day at the engineering firm?" she signed. "Perfect," Marcus beamed. "They're designing affordable hearing aids for developing countries. I'm leading the project." "Mama would be proud," Keisha signed, touching the photo on her kitchen table. "She knew," Marcus replied. She always said your voice would lift others up. After they hung up, Keisha sat in her small kitchen, surrounded by the same second-hand furniture. But everything had changed. On her refrigerator, newspaper clippings told the story. Hidden Talent Initiative transforms corporate culture. Deaf students receive record scholarship funding. Language barriers dissolved through inclusive hiring. But the headline that meant most was handwritten in a child's careful script. "Thank you, Ms. Keisha. Now my mama has a real job too." Sophia, age 7. Elena's golden pen caught the light one final time as Keisha wrote in her journal. Talent doesn't wear a uniform. Brilliance doesn't need credentials. Worth isn't determined by job title. Sometimes the most extraordinary abilities hide in the most ordinary moments. You just have to be willing to see. She closed the journal and looked out at the city lights, each one representing someone with untapped potential, waiting to be recognized. Tomorrow, she will help more people find their voices. Tonight, she was grateful for everyone who had finally learned to listen. The transformation was complete, but the mission continued. In offices and factories, schools and hospitals, extraordinary people pushed mops and answered phones and guarded buildings, carrying gifts the world desperately needed. All they required was someone willing to look beyond the uniform and see the human being underneath. The question wasn't whether talent existed in unexpected places. The question was, who would you choose to see tomorrow? Look around your workplace, your community, your daily interactions. Who are you not seeing? The person cleaning your office might speak 5 languages. The security guard might have an engineering degree. The server might be a poet. Your recognition could change someone's life and transform your understanding of human potential. Share this story if it reminds you that everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. Subscribe for more stories that challenge assumptions and celebrate the extraordinary in the ordinary. Closing line. Talent doesn't wear a uniform. Worth isn't a job title. Brilliance waits everywhere. You just have to choose to see it.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.